What happens when a game show host breaks every rule in television, stops the cameras, and transforms a stage into a sanctuary? Steve Harvey stood frozen, his microphone lowered, staring at the man in front of him who had just said 6 words that would change everything. I lost her, but not my hope. The studio went completely silent. The game didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except what happened next. 30 seconds earlier, everything had been normal. The Johnson family was leading 2-1 in the best-of-5 match against the Martinez family. Laughter filled the studio as Steve delivered his signature zingers, the audience roared, and the game clock counted down. This was supposed to be just another taping, another episode in the thousands Steve had hosted. But then Steve asked his standard question during the family introduction. So Michael, tell us a little about yourself and your family here today. Michael Johnson, a 42-year-old construction worker from Ohio, stepped forward to the microphone. He was wearing his best jeans and a pressed button-down shirt his daughter had picked out for him. His 3 children stood behind him at the podium, 2 teenage boys and a 7-year-old girl holding a small photograph. Well, Steve, Michael began, his voice steady but carrying something underneath it, something that made Steve's showman instincts suddenly go quiet. 2 years ago, my wife Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She fought for 18 months. We were supposed to come here together as a family. She was so excited when we got the call. Steve's smile faded. His body language shifted from entertainer to human being in an instant. She didn't make it, Michael continued, and his voice cracked just slightly. She passed away 6 weeks before our taping date. The producer said we could reschedule, but... He looked back at his children. But my little girl Emma said Mommy would want us to go. She'd want us to laugh again. The 7-year-old held up the photograph, a picture of a woman with a radiant smile, clearly taken before illness had stolen her strength. So we came, Michael finished. Because Sarah always said life isn't about what you lose, it's about what you still have. He paused, and then added those 6 words that would stop the show. I lost her, but not my hope. Steve Harvey, the man who had joked through thousands of episodes, who had kept his composure through every awkward answer and hilarious moment, stopped. Just stopped. The cameras kept rolling, but Steve didn't care. The teleprompter was scrolling to the next segment, but he didn't look at it. The director was signaling from the control booth, but Steve didn't see it. He put down his cards. He handed his microphone to a crew member. And he walked straight to Michael Johnson. What Steve did next broke every protocol in television production. He took off his jacket, his signature purple velvet jacket that matched his tie, and he draped it over the little girl's shoulders. Emma looked up at him with wide eyes as this jacket, still warm from Steve's body, enveloped her small frame. Baby, Steve said, kneeling down to her eye level, his voice so soft the microphones barely caught it. Your mama is so proud of you right now. You know that, right? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. She clutched the photograph tighter. Steve turned to Michael, and without a word, he pulled the man into a full embrace. Not a quick hug. Not a pat on the back. A real, human embrace that lasted 10 seconds, 15, 20. The kind of hug that says, I see your pain and I'm not afraid of it. The audience was completely silent. Some people were crying. The rival family at the other podium had tears running down their faces. Listen to me, Steve said to Michael, still holding him by the shoulders, his voice now stronger, commanding the moment. What you just did, bringing your family here, keeping that promise, teaching your children that hope survives grief, that's not just courage. That's legacy. He turned to the audience. Can we acknowledge this man right here? The studio erupted. People weren't just clapping, they were standing, some were sobbing openly, and the applause went on for nearly a minute. But Steve wasn't done. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He turned to the director and made a cutting motion across his throat. Stop the show. The producers in the control room looked at each other in confusion. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't in the plan. They had a schedule to keep, more families waiting, a taping timeline to maintain. Steve didn't care. "Michael," Steve said, "I need you to know something. Your wife? She's here. I know you feel her. I know your babies feel her. And I'm going to make sure that every person watching this show understands what real strength looks like." He pulled a card from his pocket, not a game card, but his personal business card. "This has my direct line on it. Not an assistant. Not a secretary. Me. Because when this episode airs, you're going to get attention. Media, interviews, people wanting your story. And I want you to call me first. I want to make sure you and these babies are protected and supported." Michael couldn't speak. He just nodded, clutching the card like it was a lifeline. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. What happened next transformed the entire dynamic of the show. Steve turned to the Martinez family, the opposing team standing at their podium, watching this moment unfold. "Martinez family?" Steve called out. "Come over here." Rosa Martinez, the matriarch of the opposing team, didn't hesitate. She brought her entire family across the stage. Without a word, they surrounded Michael and his children in a circle of support. Complete strangers, competitors for a prize, now united in shared humanity. "This is what we're supposed to be," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. "This right here. Not competing. Not fighting. Just being human beings who care about each other." The producers had given up trying to control the moment. The director let the cameras roll. What they were capturing was no longer a game show. It was something much more profound. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Little Emma, wearing Steve's jacket that was comically oversized on her small frame, walked to the center of the stage. She was still holding her mother's photograph. In a voice that was small but somehow carried through the entire studio, she said, "Mr. Steve, can I show everyone my mommy?" Steve's composure finally broke. Tears ran down his face as he nodded. He picked her up, this tiny girl in his giant jacket, and held her so she could show the photograph to the cameras. "This is Sarah Johnson," Steve said to the camera, his voice cracking. "And she's the reason we're all here today. Not for points. Not for prizes. But because she taught her family that hope is stronger than loss." The camera zoomed in on the photograph. Sarah Johnson had been beautiful, with laugh lines around her eyes and a smile that radiated warmth even through a static image. "Sarah," Steve said directly to the photograph, as if she could hear him, "your husband kept his promise. Your babies are here. And I promise you that I'm going to make sure they're okay." The weight of that promise hung in the air. The taping eventually continued, but it was different now. The game was played, points were scored, but everyone understood that something more important had happened. The Johnson family won the match, won the whole tournament, actually, but that wasn't what anyone would remember. After the cameras stopped rolling, after the audience had left, Steve stayed. For 3 hours he stayed. He sat with the Johnson family in the green room. He called his own children and told them about what had happened. He made phone calls to connections he had, grief counselors, family therapists, financial advisors. Because Steve Harvey understood something that day that would change how he hosted every show after. The real power of his platform wasn't in making people laugh, though that mattered. It wasn't in giving away prizes, though that helped. The real power was in those moments when entertainment gave way to humanity, when the script got thrown out and real life walked onto the stage. 3 weeks later, before the episode aired, Steve sent a package to the Johnson home. Inside was his jacket, the one he draped over Emma, professionally cleaned and folded. With it was a letter, handwritten, that said, "Emma, this jacket has been on television 1,000 times. It's been to the Oscars. It's been to the White House. But it has never been worn by anyone as brave as you. It's yours now. And every time you wear it, I want you to remember that your mama's love is bigger than any loss, and your hope is more powerful than any grief. Wear it proud. Steve. But the impact of that day extended far beyond one family. When the episode finally aired, it went viral immediately. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed 50 million times across social media platforms. People weren't just watching. They were sharing their own stories of loss, their own journeys through grief, their own moments of finding hope in darkness. The clip was shared in grief support groups, played at memorial services, used by therapists to help clients understand that hope and grief can coexist. Parents showed it to their children to teach them about resilience. Teachers used it in classrooms to talk about empathy. Steve received thousands of letters. Many of them started the same way. I lost someone too, but your reaction to Michael reminded me that I haven't lost hope. The producers of Family Feud reported something remarkable. After that episode, the show received a different kind of applicant. Yes, families still wanted to win money. But the applications now came with stories of loss, of survival, of hope. People wanted to be on the show not just to compete, but to be seen, to have their stories acknowledged, to stand where Michael Johnson had stood and be reminded that their grief was valid and their hope was powerful. Steve started a new tradition. Before every taping, he would spend 10 minutes off stage with each family, really getting to know them. Not for the cameras. Not for content. Just as a human being connecting with other human beings. Because he'd learned that every person had a story, and some of those stories needed to be honored, not just entertained. The jacket became a symbol. Emma Johnson wore it to her middle school graduation. She wore it to her first day of high school. She wore it when she gave a speech at a grief support camp for children who had lost parents. And in every photograph, you could see that the jacket was still too big for her, but she wore it with a pride that transcended size. When asked about it in interviews, she would say, "This jacket reminds me that strangers can become family, that television can become church, and that one moment of kindness can change everything." Steve Harvey never forgot that day. In interviews years later, when asked about his favorite moment in television, he didn't talk about celebrity guests or viral moments or big wins. He talked about Michael Johnson saying, "I lost her, but not my hope. That's when I understood my real job," Steve would say. "My job isn't to host a game show. My job is to be present when people need someone to witness their pain and celebrate their courage. The game show is just the vehicle." He kept Michael's family in his life. He attended Emma's graduations, sent birthday cards to the boys, checked in with Michael during the holidays. Because that promise he made, the one in front of millions of people, wasn't just words. It was a covenant. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The legacy of that moment extended into Steve's other work. His motivational talks became deeper, more vulnerable. His advice to young people shifted from chase success to be present for people's pain. His understanding of fame and platform evolved from use it to entertain to use it to connect. And every year, on the anniversary of Sarah Johnson's death, Steve would post a picture of Emma in the jacket with a simple caption. "Hope is stronger than loss. Always." The ultimate lesson wasn't about television or fame or even grief. It was about the moment when one person stops everything, the cameras, the script, the schedule, the plan, and says, "This human being in front of me matters more than all of that." It was about the radical act of presence, of saying, "I see you." Not just with words but with actions, with time, with a piece of clothing that becomes a symbol of care. Michael Johnson never forgot what Steve Harvey did that day. But more importantly, his children never forgot. They learned that hope isn't naive optimism. Hope is the choice to keep living, keep loving, keep showing up even when loss has shattered your world. And they learned it because a television host broke all the rules to honor their mother's memory and their father's courage. The game show went on. The prizes were won. The episodes aired. But what lasted, what really lasted, was the memory of the day when Steve Harvey stopped being a host and became exactly what was needed in that moment, a witness to grief, a champion of hope, and a reminder that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is simply stop everything and see someone's pain. Years later, at Emma's high school graduation, she gave a speech. She wore the jacket, still too big, still carrying Steve's scent mixed with her own memories. And she told the entire graduating class about the day her family went on Family Feud, about losing her mother, about finding hope, about a television host who taught her that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. "My mother used to say that life isn't about what you lose," Emma told her classmates, her voice strong now, no longer the small voice of a 7-year-old. "It's about what you still have. And what I still have is hope. What I still have is love. What I still have is this jacket that reminds me that strangers can become heroes, and that one moment of genuine humanity can echo through an entire lifetime." The audience rose to their feet. And somewhere, watching the live stream of the graduation, Steve Harvey wiped away tears and texted Michael, "Your wife was right. You didn't lose hope. And look what it grew into." That's the power of stopping. Of seeing. Of choosing humanity over schedule. That's the legacy of Steve Harvey. Not just as an entertainer, but as a man who understood that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is stop the show and start being human. And in that moment of pure humanity, both grief and hope can exist, both pain and joy can coexist, and one person's courage can inspire millions to keep going even when loss feels insurmountable. The cameras eventually turned off. The studio lights dimmed. The audience went home. But what happened that day never really ended. It lives on in every person who saw it and chose hope. It lives on in Emma's jacket. It lives on in Michael's strength. And it lives on in the reminder that we are all, always, capable of stopping our busy lives to witness someone else's pain and celebrate their courage to keep going. That's not just good television. That's what it means to be human.